Hello everybody, welcome back to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today we're going to be going over Gamers Without Borders 2023 for Rainbow Six Siege. So these are the qualifier events for Gamers 8, which takes place in Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of money on the line there, and there's actually a lot of money on the line here, not only because you are qualifying for the event that has a lot of money, but there's a lot of money to be doled out to charity, and it's set amounts. Just winning, it's still the same amount. No matter who wins, there's still the same amount of money going to charity, but you get to select who, which charity is receiving that money. So yeah, we're gonna start with Korea and Japan and then go into Europe. They happened on the same days, with Europe concluding last, and then North America and South America happened on the same days as each other, and then North America ended last. South America is basically just Brazil. And Korea and Japan, I might say Asia or APAC going forward, but I do just mean Korea and Japan. So yeah, the four teams here, we have Cyclops, Sandbox, Crest, and Talon. Two fully Japanese rosters, two fully South Korean rosters. Sandbox versus Crest, it was a 2-0, and we sort of see this full spectrum of results from the four events. So this one is extremely not close, although we do have some close maps, but as you can see here, we have the minimum number of maps played. These each could have gone to 3 maps, this could have gone to 5 maps, but no, it's all flawless victories map-wise for the winner. So Sandbox versus Crest, 7-3, so not very close for the first map, and then it goes all 15 round second one, so at least we had one close map there in the 2-0. And then Talon gets crushed by Cyclops, 7-2, 7-1, only 3 rounds won by Talon, and Cyclops takes on Sandbox in the final. And it's a 3-0, but as they say, it is a close 3-0, 7-5, 7-5, 8-7, so a couple of max regulations and then a max overtime. Sandbox couldn't quite put a map together, again, like a decent number of rounds, but you have to get to a certain number of rounds, or else the rest of the rounds that you won don't matter at all. So at the end of this, I'm going to look at just a couple stats, just a few things that I thought were nice, and I wanted to point them out. But okay, let's move on to Europe here. So Europe is sort of the opposite. So we had really one-sided affairs, all of the minimum number of maps played in Korea and Japan, but here in Europe we saw the max number of maps played. So 3 maps here, 3 maps here, 5 maps here, so 11 maps in total. BDS, M&M, Wolves, and Wild are the teams partaking in the event. Keep in mind, all these teams, so some teams were directly invited to Gamers 8, some were directly invited to this that we're looking at, Gamers Without Borders, and then there were qualifiers for each of the regions. So Wolves and M&M came through the open qualifiers. BDS was directly invited to Gamers 8 last year. Wild won the qualifier for Gamers 8. So this event we're talking about, they won it last year. So BDS versus M&M, it starts out looking quite dangerous for BDS. They get 7-1, they get slammed on border. And there's a few different ways this could have gone. Of course, M&M was at the major, BDS was not. M&M, they had a fairly deep run. They made it to top 8, and they only lost to the eventual tournament winners in they were eliminated by. They did lose to some other teams, but they were not eliminated up until quarterfinals. And the way that played out, had they not made a few critical errors on the first map, they could have very well 2-0'd W7M, and I mean, who knows who would have won the event from there. But again, they were close-ish to defeating the tournament winners in quarterfinals, so maybe they would have made it all the way to the finals. And BDS, a really strong, historically one of the strongest, if not just the strongest team in sort of recent times from Europe. Of course, G2 won the 6 Invitational, but BDS won the major before that. They won the Gamers 8 tournament last year, which was shortly before that major. So they had a lot going for them in the last year, and that's not even all of their good results. That's just some of the things that they won. So anyways, yeah, it's looking bad. Maybe they really fell off. Maybe there's a big reason they didn't make the major, or maybe M&M is really hot after their major run. And then it sort of goes the way that you'd expect if you hadn't seen the more recent stuff. BDS take it down 7-4, 7-4. So they win 2 out of 3, and they win fairly decisively on their maps, even if they got crushed on the other one. So yeah, M&M out of the competition. Wolves versus Wild, and we see some pretty close maps. We see a max regulation into a max overtime, and then a 7-4, so not quite a max anything, but still 11 rounds played, and Wild take Wolves out of the competition. And then BDS versus Wild, and we see all max regulations except for first map goes max overtime. So, I mean, if this had gone BDS's way, this would have been a clean 3-0, but instead we get to see all 5 maps, always exciting. We don't get to see a whole lot of best of 5 play in Siege in general. Most high-level competition is best of 3s, and then like grand finals of big events are best of 5s, but a best of 5 in a qualifier here. It turned out pretty well. There weren't like a lot of blowouts or anything, although, again, 3-0 Korea and Japan, but still close maps. And, you know, just all really close maps here. This was a really exciting one to watch. Moving over to South America, and again, this is really just Brazil. I think it's all Brazilian, right? I think all these teams, yeah. All Brazilian players. Okay, so Liquid versus Tropicals, another blowout. Only 4 rounds won by Tropicals. A little bit better than the, was it Talon over in APAC, but not much better. Liquid looked really, really strong. Keep in mind, Liquid just came off of a grand final appearance at the previous major. They didn't get a map in that grand final, but still making it to the grand final is a big feat in and of itself. Ninjas in Pajamas versus Lo-Swan. And going into this one, you know, you'd say that Liquid was definitely the favorite. Tropicals, there's no way these guys aren't getting smoked. Maybe Lo-Swan makes a really surprise run, but you have to imagine that Ninjas in Pajamas were the only like real competition Liquid was going to have. I had a little bit of a feeling, and you know, I didn't quite make the call, but Ninjas in Pajamas do end up taking it down, as you can see. Let's talk about this one first, though. NiP versus Lo-Swan. It's pretty close. You know, if NiP had lost round 15 here and map 2 went the same, then Lo-Swan would have advanced 2-0. Of course, 2 very close maps, but a 2-0 nonetheless. But NiP do manage to clinch one of the first 2 and then win very dominantly on the third, sending them to the grand final versus Liquid, where, you know, this is another really exciting one. We only saw 1 overtime, but, you know, it's a lot more exciting when you get a max overtime in the final map as opposed to any other map. So we don't see as many 7-5s as we did in Europe, but still a couple of 7-4s, 7-2, not as close. But as far as how it progressed, a couple of 7-4s, same thing that we saw from BDS against M&M, although those were the last 2 maps in a best of 3, not the first 2 in a best of 5. Ninjas turn it around on Villa 7-2, swinging the momentum in their favor, and then a close Clubhouse and an even closer Cafe. You know, just all cards on the table, score 7-7, and they take down the final round. Liquid lose another best of 5, another heartbreaker. This wasn't the grand final of the actual event, but I mean, even just going to the event, like even if you make it decently far, not super far, like there's just a lot of money on the line. You really wanted to go to this event if possible, and Ninjas are taking their place. So, you know, it's hard to say how good NiP was actually in the previous major, because they fell to Sonics, who then fell in the next round, but they fell to W7M. And, you know, Liquid was the one in the grand final. Had Sonics been on the other side of the bracket, and maybe they would have been fighting them in the grand final, and based on how it went, they probably would have lost. But it's entirely possible Sonics were, like, quote unquote, the second best team at the event, even though that's not how they placed. Liquid lost 3-0 versus W7M in the grand final, and they also lost once to them in Swiss. Sonics lost 2-0 to W7M in the bracket in the semifinals, and they also lost a best of 1. So they lost 3 maps to W7M. Liquid lost 4 maps. You know, it's a little bit of apples and oranges, but still, you know, maybe depending on how you want to evaluate things, maybe you think that NiP was the 3rd best team at the event, okay? And maybe Liquid was less than that, whatever. But okay, all this to say that, yeah, it's always exciting to see a reverse 3-0. It looked like maybe NiP was just out of it. Liquid was going to take it cleanly, but we fight to the bitter end, and Ninjas take it down and complete the reverse sweep. And then finally, we have North America. So here we see a little bit of a mix of what happened in the other regions, looking at the bracket, and well, the 4 teams are M80, Dark Zero, West Garfield Park, and Beast Coast. Looking at the bracket, we see pretty decisive semis, just like we saw in Korea and Japan, and then we see a bit of a nail-biter grand final like we saw in Europe and in South America. So M80 versus West Garfield Park, 7-4, 7-3, so pretty decisive. Not as bad as, you know, like Talon or Tropicals lost, but still not a pretty unceremonious exit from West Garfield Park. They were the only non-pro team here, you know, Dark Zero, M80, and Beast Coast all being professional teams, West Garfield Park being not even, you know, a Challenger League team, because that doesn't really exist anymore, but a Tier 2 team. And then Beast Coast versus Dark Zero. Beast Coast 1 round better than West Garfield Park, but pretty handily did this series go in the favor of Dark Zero. Beast Coast lacking a little bit. I don't think they really played as well as we saw them play in the past, and I think they've pretty well solidified themselves for the time being as the 6th best team in North America. There were 4 NA teams at the major. We saw SSG, Sonics, Dark Zero, and M80, and then Oxygen. They're already direct invited to Gamers 8. They were the highest placing NA team at the 6 Invitational. And then Beast Coast, who went toe-to-toe with a lot of them, beat a lot of them in the North American League not too long ago, but you know, they missed out. They haven't gone to an international event yet. Weren't at SI, didn't go to the major, so we'll see what they do next stage. But you know, they're pretty firmly number 6 for the time being. And then finally, M80 versus Dark Zero. So these teams already have a bit of a history, especially considering M80 is such a new org in the scene. I'm not talking about back when they were XSET, but since M80 has joined. So their first encounter, and this is back when they still had Yaga and Spirits, and when Dark Zero still, back before they had achieved. That was a 2-1 victory in favor of Dark Zero at SI, and then they made the roster changes, so Spoit and Iconic go over to M80, and Achieve joins Dark Zero. It was an 8-7 victory for Dark Zero in the regular stage of NAL, and then they play in the finals to determine the first and second seed for the major. M80 wins that 2-1, and then M80 wins it 3-2. So over the course of the last 4 encounters, which is just over the course of the last like 3 months or so, they are 6-6 on maps. So M80 just ties it up. They're all pretty close because we saw, you know, map 5 here, we saw map 3 in both of the best of 3s, and we saw round 15 in their best of 1. So really tight affairs. It's looking like maybe a little bit of a rivalry here, especially now that M80 has Iconic and Dark Zero still has NJR. You know, they used to play with each other on a not a pro team, but they both played on Disrupt at one point, but it wasn't at the same time, right? So yeah, maybe a little bit of a rivalry there. And then of course they were the 2 teams going head to head in the final for first and second seed. They were also the 2 worst performing NA teams at the major, but not that they got massively outperformed by Space Station. But anyways, to talk about this one a little bit, not as close as we saw in like Europe or anything like that. 3-7-5s, but no overtime. We saw 2 pretty decisive maps, both going in the favor of M80. And a little bit of a comeback, I guess. You know, M80 backs against the wall. They win the last 2 maps to secure the series, and they won it, like, maybe not super dominantly, but pretty clearly they put it away because they only lost close maps and they won a couple of decisive ones. So I think they won 31 rounds, whereas Dark Zero won 23 rounds. And so yeah, good on M80. Maybe they'll finally live up to the expectations that were set for them at the major at Gamers 8. So another international event, and this time a little bit different stakes, right? You're not fighting for like SI or anything, but I think you are fighting for like more money, right? Anyways, so that does it for all of the regions, but now there are just a couple of things on CGG I wanted to show just because I thought they were interesting enough. So here's Europe, the overall stats, and what I wanted to look at here is the fact that outside of Usus, nobody put in like a spectacular performance. It was all pretty tightly clustered. Aces the highest, still below 1.1, and then Bride all the way down here, 0.85. So, you know, maybe not like super close, but nobody doing dreadfully, nobody doing spectacularly. Again, excluding Usus, who really good performance, but still his team fell in the first round. Really strange that he got 1 entry engagement over 3 maps, but it is what it is there. You'll also notice that the 3 of the main support players are on the bottom here, and actually 4, I guess Bibu is sort of a support player. Sort of the main planters here at the bottom. Shinka, I think, is intended probably to plant more than Bibu, but it worked out that Bibu planted a little bit more. Wolves didn't plant that much in general, but Nello, the main planter on M&M, and then Bride, the main planter on BDS. They're also the main hard breachers, you know, a couple of Thermite mains. The exception, the main hard breacher not here at the bottom is actually Packbull, so big performance from him, and I guess that's really just what I wanted to point out. Yeah, big performance from Usus, and we saw a pretty big major from him as well. Solotop was the true star of the show, but you know, good showing from Usus there as well. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to look at was this match, Dark Zero versus Beast Coast, and you'll notice Gaveni with 36 kills. As far as, you know, KPRs go in non-best of ones, you know, every once in a while somebody puts up an insane performance, and especially when it's like a top tier team versus a not top tier team. But Gaveni versus Beast Coast went crazy. You'll notice at least twice as many kills as any other member of his team, and so, you know, add up any 2 of these guys and he has more kills than them. On Beast Coast, everybody getting pretty well murked except for Hyper with a pretty good showing. Hat had a really dreadful first map. Well, you know, he went like 3-8, 3-9, something like that. He turned it around a little bit on the second map, which was Oregon. He went 11-8 or 9, so not massively positive, but still hit double digits at least there. Mr. B not doing too well, but sort of a support player. You expect that a bit. Doc and Vertical, the 2 really struggling. Doc also a bit of a support player, and then Vertical a bit more of a fragger, and that's reflected by a few more frags, but still these are pretty unfortunate numbers. Like I said before, Beast Coast just weren't really looking like themselves. Maybe they should have had a closer series against Dark Zero, but Dark Zero was certainly the favorite going in here. And I think Dark Zero, they're sort of working as intended in this match at least. Canadian and Achieve should be the bottom 2 players with, you know, decent frags and then some plants between the 2, all of them actually on Canadian here. And then the rest of the players doing a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of kills. Pamba and NJR were the 2 not going absolutely off. Sometimes all three of them go off, sometimes it's one, sometimes it's two, but this is roughly what you want them to look like. And one of them popped off here. It was Gavini, 3.0 KD, 2.0 entry KD, 86% cost, 45% survival. Actually, everyone really good survival here. Most of these guys really bad survival rates. Yeah, just crazy performance by Gavini. You don't see 36 and 12 too often, especially over the course of 2 maps. He went, I think, 19 and 5 on Bank, and then he cooled off a little bit, 17 and 7 on Oregon, but still obviously plus 10 on one map is pretty good. Okay, that's all I really wanted to talk about, so I'm gonna call it there. If there was any really cool stuff that you saw in the event that you want to point out, feel free to do so in the comments, or maybe if I you know, missed anything or got anything wrong, feel free to let me know. I could have made a mistake here or there, but okay, like and subscribe, that would be appreciated. With all that being said, catch you guys next time.